So, as we all know, Doctor Who is a television institution, solidified in British culture after airing hundreds of episodes over many long years. But despite all of this time and all of these adventures, there's always something that leaves us wanting more. We always crave one more adventure with our favourite Doctor, just one more trip. And luckily, Doctor Who is big enough that we can actually get these extra adventures, even long after our favourite Doctor has left. Whilst these can come in books or comics, the main form of expanded Doctor Who media are the audio plays by Big Finish Productions. You may have heard about them because Big Finish fans can sometimes be like stereotypical vegans, and feel the need to constantly remind you about spare parts and Jubilee every 5 seconds. For a long time, I was really hesitant to get into Big Finish. I almost felt like I was being forced towards it. Eventually, a few months ago, I just gave up and decided to join the herd, starting with some of the 10th Doctor adventures, since it's New Who and they're just like TV episodes without the visuals. And I found myself really liking them. In fact, I'd go so far as to say some of them were better than actual TV episodes. And hey, wait, don't leave because it's not TV. They're actually really good, trust me. There will be spoilers ahead for volumes 1, 2 and 3 of the 10th Doctor Adventures, since I'm reviewing all 9 standalone stories. However, I do really recommend going and listening to them first so you can enjoy them more, but I'll timestamp all of the stories so you know when I'm talking about each one.
You're listening to a Big Finish production.
Starting off Volume 1, Technophobia by Matt Fitton is a very solid story and a good opening to the 10th Doctor adventures. Much like the title suggests, this story is all about people becoming scared of technology. It turns out that this is due to aliens who are dumbing down the human race in order to invade and enslave the population. I think it's a really good concept for a story and it's executed really well. There's some exploration of how reliant we are on technology, since characters end up being scared of even normal everyday things, like coffee machines and vacuum cleaners. The acting is good, especially by David Tennant and Catherine Tate, who slip back into their roles seamlessly, but almost as if they never left. However, the supporting cast is a bit weak, and I didn't really find myself engaging with the side characters the way Fitton probably intended. However, I do think it's a nice touch that the Doctor finds himself affected by the dumbing down influence, making him ineffective and forcing Donna to come up with a pragmatic plan to save the day and stop the aliens, giving her a moment in the spotlight that shows her value as a companion, beyond being sassy and sarcastic. I would probably give Technophobia a B ranking on the 10th Doctor Adventures tier list. Tennant and Tate do an incredible job as usual with their trademark great chemistry, and it's an easy story to visualise. You can easily imagine it being an actual episode. The concept of the dumbing down invasion is a great creative premise, but the story feels quite run-of-the-mill and unspectacular. It's good, but it doesn't really advance further than that, meaning it can't really break the ceiling to get above a B.
Oops.
The second story of Volume 1 is Time Reaver, written by Jenny T. Colgan, and it exists. I'm not really sure what I think about this story, because it has a lot going for it, but I found the audio design really chaotic and oppressive to listen to. I'm sure this was intentional at parts to give you a sense of being overwhelmed by the surroundings, but it's a bit too much at times and makes it harder to enjoy. That being said, the setting of the story is amazing. The story takes place on a sprawling, planet-wide spaceport that kind of reminds me of Coruscant from Star Wars, with constant foot traffic and infinite city as far as the eye can see. It's not exactly an original concept by any stretch, but it's the perfect setting for audio, because you don't have to worry about the budget of a TV show, so the idea can be realised well. The main driving concept of the story is the existence of something called a Time Reaver, which is a gun that prolongs the perception of time for anyone shot with it. I think this concept is really imaginative and strong, especially because they explain that people use it on themselves as a drug to make themselves feel positive emotions for longer, eventually becoming trapped as a result. The story itself, however, is a bit lackluster and feels like huge missed potential. I do like the idea of a dying civilization trying to use these guns to prolong the last moments of their planet before a supernova, but the story doesn't give that background context enough time to shine. Instead, we get chases through the streets with a weird tentacle monster trying to get the guns which have been smuggled in by a runaway girl. It brings it down a notch for me, feeling a bit disjointed and not character driven enough, even with the Doctor having to spend centuries inside his own mind as a result of the guns. They just kind of skip over that, which is really disappointing. So that, combined with my uncomfortable listening experience, means I'd give it a C on the tier list. It's a shame because the setting and the Time Reaver concept are both great, but they feel like they weren't used to their full potential. Last up for Volume 1 is Death and the Queen by James Goss, which is by far the best of all 9 stories. It's absolutely incredible and I enjoyed every single second of it. The story focuses on Donna becoming engaged to a prince of a kingdom the Doctor has never heard of, with the prince boasting that the kingdom has had 500 years of peace. All of the setup is executed really quickly and efficiently, with a comedic sequence at the beginning using flashbacks to explain how we got to this point. It's pure exposition, but it feels just like a fun comedic sequence, so you don't really notice it. The comedy in this story is absolutely perfect. Not only are all the jokes great, but the comedic timing is impeccable, especially this part right here.
That is one weird cloud.
Yeah, it's deadly.
How do you know?
That got a good exhale from me when I first heard it. Catherine Tate and David Tennant's chemistry is always good, but it's especially on point in this story. They play off each other so well. The side characters are all fleshed out well, and the concept of the episode is very good. It turns out that the reason for the 500 years of peace is because an alien species sold the kingdom a perception filter, with the payment being human sacrifices, specifically those who marry into the royal family. You know, as you do. It's a great concept with easy to imagine visuals. Everything comes together so well, meaning you just want more and more because it's so enjoyable. Death and the Queen easily gets an S rank because it's such a fun adventure. The storytelling by James Goss is imaginative, the comedy is strong, and it's just the perfect audio for anyone who loves the Doctor and Donna's partnership in Series 4 of the show. None of the other 10th Doctor adventures are able to capture the same magic as this one in my opinion. So if you're gonna listen to any of them, I would recommend this the most. Despite coming out after Volume 1, Volume 2 of the 10th Doctor Adventures actually takes us back to the time period of Series 2, with stories featuring the Doctor and Rose. Yay. The first of these, Infamy of the Zaross, is probably the best of the 3. This story by John Dorney is set in Norwich of all places, starting with Jackie visiting an old friend, but the city is soon invaded by aliens called the Zaross. It turns out that the invasion is staged for an alien TV show about invading planets, but the killing is actually real. I think this is a really great concept. It's very imaginative and creative, also allowing for some sneaky commentary about the television industry and its hunger for ratings, kind of like The Long Game did back in 2005. There's a lot of focus on Jackie, which is always much appreciated. Actor Camille Codry is by far the star of the audio, doing a wonderful job as always as Jackie, recapturing the abrasive yet protective nature of the character. Unfortunately, the same doesn't apply for Billie Piper as Rose. This is a problem that affects all 3 of the audios, because she just doesn't sound like Rose. She sounds too posh, like when Cassandra possessed Rose in New Earth at the start of Series 2. It makes it quite obvious that Billie Piper has been away from the role for quite a while, and this detracted from my enjoyment of the story. Infamy of the Zaross gets a B ranking because the driving concept of the episode is so inventive and good. The story is paced very well, feeling like a smooth and enjoyable ride. I like getting more time with Jackie, allowing you to get more familiar with her. Rose as a character is written well, showing how she's becoming more independent and more like the Doctor, but sadly the acting lets this strong writing down. But it's still a very enjoyable adventure that feels right at home in Series 2.
It'd never have worked anyway. I mean, who wants to watch a TV series about me?
Next up in Volume 2 is The Sword of the Chevalier, which is a story I just could not enjoy in the slightest. I mean, for a start, it's set in Slough. I'd rather stand on the surface of midnight and get vaporized instantly than set foot there. This story is a celebrity historical in the same vein as The Unquiet Dead and Tooth and Claw. Much like those 2 stories, I found it very boring and a slog to get through. The titular celebrity is the Chevalier Dion, who is a French spy that seems to have transcended gender constructs. I'm sure there are many interesting stories to tell with this historical figure, but this isn't one of them in my opinion. The story is about a multi-faced alien slaver coming to Earth in the 1700s to capture slaves and destroy the planet in order to make supplies scarce and dominate the market. It's a very good idea, and I love the concept on paper, but it just doesn't really end up coming out very well. Rose feels like a tacked on afterthought in this audio, and I didn't really find myself caring about the Chevalier anywhere near as much as writer Guy Adams must have. The concept of the villain was pretty good, having multiple faces, one with a male voice and one with a female voice. I think it fits well with the themes of the Chevalier's gender fluidity, but apart from that, it's just not really a very good villain. I like the world building with the idea of the consortium, but there was a real lack of tension or drama throughout the story. It's the worst 10th Doctor adventure by a country mile, sitting at a D on the tier list. I just found it to be really boring and uninspired. It all felt like it had kind of been done before, and I just couldn't wait for it to be over. Last up on Volume 2 is Cold Vengeance by Matt Fitton, which sees the Doctor and Rose find themselves in a cold storage space station that becomes the setting of an Ice Warrior revenge plot to destroy the planet below. I had quite a good time with this episode, although it certainly has its flaws. I thought the setting was quite good, mixing the exoticness of the universe with the mundanity of supermarkets. I do enjoy the Ice Warriors as a villain, and I think they're handled quite well here, although they're portrayed more like Silurians, as their planet was taken by humanity. Even though it's a Silurian trope, I do like the idea of it being used for Ice Warriors, especially because we associate them so much with Mars, so it's nice to have them call somewhere else home. I like the themes of revenge and how misguided it is, fitting well within the Doctor's pacifistic and forgiving nature, setting up a nice contrast. The supporting cast is alright and the episode is well paced, but it still felt lacking in some departments. It felt like the Ice Warriors were a bit underutilised, and Rose once again ends up feeling pointless in the story. I found it a smooth, enjoyable story however, so I'd give it a tentative B ranking. There were good themes and the setting was good, but there was just something that holds it back, although I'm not quite sure I can place my finger on what exactly that thing is. I think it possibly just feels too run-of-the-mill, much like Technophobia, meaning Volume 2 finishes less like a flourish and just kind of fizzles out with a slightly above average story. But it's still nice to see the 10th Doctor get a story with the Ice Warriors though. After the bump in the road that is Volume 2, Donna comes back for Volume 3, and you can immediately tell the difference in quality and energy thanks to No Place by James Goss, which was actually the very first story I listened to. Not only my first 10th Doctor Adventures audio, but my first Big Finish audio entirely. We don't talk about Necromantia, it doesn't count. Going in with No Place as my introduction to Big Finish was kind of trial by fire, because it's quite an experimental audio. It's framed like an episode of a ghost hunting TV show, almost entirely seen through the perspective of the presenter. It has a brilliantly done slow burn mystery that keeps you gripped and on the edge of your seat, with lots of great paranormal happenings going on as the tension ramps up throughout. You get drip fed elements to the mystery that all pay off at the climax, making the ending feel very satisfying. The twist of the story is quite predictable however, since I worked it out pretty early on, although I won't spoil it here. There's a really uncomfortably forced family dynamic of the Doctor, Donna, Sylvia and Wilf, as the Doctor and Donna are pretending to be a married couple. It's very disconcerting and makes you feel uncomfortable, but this is intentional and it does wonders to pull you into the spooky, uneasy atmosphere of the audio, because it just feels wrong for them to be acting like this. I'd say No Place easily earns an A rank on the tier list, since the narrative is framed creatively and the story is paced really well with a great ending. If there's one criticism I have, it's that this kind of framing works better on TV and doesn't quite translate as well to audio, but the writing, acting and sound design more than make up for it. The mystery and the slow burn storytelling makes the audio really thrilling and gripping. It's really enjoyable in a tense horror movie way. If you like the paranormal like I do, you'll love this audio. Despite No Place proving a very strong opener to the volume, 1 Mile Down by Jenny T. Colgan manages to follow it pretty well. In this story, the Doctor and Donna go on holiday to an underwater city now encased within human-friendly domes, forcing the aquatic natives to wear helmets like Sandy from SpongeBob. I was actually quite surprised at how much social commentary the story ended up having. I didn't expect such biting and obvious commentary, but I thought it was done incredibly well. The story is all about cultural appropriation, destruction of heritage, and driving out indigenous peoples. It's communicated through the lens of a company turning the city into a tourist location, driving out the species that live there and forcing them to work to maintain the city. I don't think I can really sum it up in a way that does it justice, but Jenny T. Colgan communicates her social commentary extremely well, using this alien civilization as a glaring allegory for real-world issues. However, I did find the characterization a bit bleak and pessimistic, since one of the supporting characters is a huge racist, and the other is a culturally appropriating hypocrite, which means most of the characters in this story are bad people in their own individual ways. However, despite the cynical outlook, the audio is very good, a thoroughly gripping and enjoyable adventure. The Judoon aren't really the focus of the story, despite being on the cover. They're used more like Russell T Davies set them up to be used though, hired muscle to keep the peace. I actually think it's the right way to use the Judoon, and it helps to continue that Davies era building of a cohesive universe. I would say 1 Mile Down deserves an A rank on the tier list. It's a story that would work just as well if it was a TV episode, since it's pretty easy to visualise and get into, with great thought-provoking social commentary and a clever use of a marketable Doctor Who monster.
It's Bring Your Baby Rhino to Work Day!
Prisoner, why am I amusing?
You're cute!
Despite winning a Scribe Award for Best Audio Drama, I wasn't really a fan of Roy Gill's story, The Creeping Death. I didn't enjoy it a whole lot. The story is set during the London smog of the 1950s, which I think is a good setting and explores recent history in a unique way, but the monster lets this interesting setting down significantly. The monster of the story turns out to be a swarm of carnivorous aliens that live in the smog and kill people who step into their swarm. If that sounds familiar, that's because it's pretty much the Vasta Narada again, but not as intimidating or memorable. It's a shame because I really like the sound design, along with the decision to explore homosexuality being illegal at the time the story is set. It prompts the listener to really think about it and how recently being gay was illegal. Donna effectively serves as a good audience surrogate because she is understandably confused by it being illegal in such recent history, reflecting the listener's own shock and confusion. However, I can't help but feel like it could have been explored a lot more than it was, and they probably should have found a way to tie these themes into the villain or the overall message of the episode. The sound design is really good, but the acting is very spotty and some of the cast is quite wooden in their delivery, so I think I'll give The Creeping Death a C, since David Tennant and Catherine Tate do a lot to redeem it with their great acting and natural chemistry. It's a sadly disappointing ending to such a strong volume before it, but there are good parts here and there, such as the callback to Pompeii when Donna asks the Doctor to do something about the smog that ends up killing so many people in the city. So I guess I would say check it out if you want, but I didn't really enjoy it. The way I see Big Finish is that it allows you to jump into more adventures with the characters you know and love, along with exposing you to the magnificence of the 8th Doctor, #McGangang. It's a way to satisfy that itch you get for more TV stories with a certain Doctor. I've always enjoyed the 10th Doctor, so I thought that the 10th Doctor adventures would be a good gateway for getting into Big Finish, and they really were. Listening to these stories felt a lot like turning back the clock to 2006 and 2008. All of the audios feel like they fit neatly into their associated series, so you find it easy to believe that they were adventures that happened between episodes, because each box set is given a specific time frame. Even though I didn't have a great time with Sword of the Chevalier and The Creeping Death, I really enjoyed these 3 volumes. You can really feel the passion and the energy that went into making all of them. They feel finely crafted and well made, with great writing, music, and sound design. I was worried about the lack of visuals going into my listening experience, but I soon found it easy to get into, especially because of David Tennant's trademark magnetic charm and chemistry with everyone. It's like he never left, and he combines so naturally with Catherine Tate for their 6 stories, which helps ease you into the different medium. The 3 volumes are sadly let down by volume 2, because Billie Piper just doesn't seem to pick the role back up as well as Tennant and Tate did, so her stories suffer as a result. If I had to rank the 3 volumes, I'd probably put volume 3 at the top, closely followed by volume 1, with volume 2 at the bottom. Volume 3 is more consistent, with 2 great stories, compared to volume 1 which has just 1 great story and 2 okay stories. definitely being carried by Death and the Queen. But even with the less good stories from the 3 volumes, it just feels great to have more new adventures with these characters I grew up with, which means they're all worth picking up if you have the money to. It's annoying though, because volume 2 is the weakest, yet the most expensive, setting you back a whole 45 quid for a physical copy. But I guess that's just the price you have to pay for my new overlord Nicholas Briggs, who rules my wallet with an iron fist. And I'd like to give a special thank you to my gold level patrons, Albrecht Erb, Mark Hippoldguy Taylor, and Stefnik Nevin Miller. Thank you a lot for your support.